Well, welcome back to Table Talk, everyone. I'm your host, Yvette Gallinar, and today I have the honor of introducing you to a dear friend of mine, Andrew Jones. Andrew is a researcher, and he was actually our tour guide on our trip to Turkey in June of this year. Many of you have heard about our trip to Turkey, and mostly our church family has heard about it quite a bit. I posted one video so far on that, but I have to say it was one of the most memorable trips that we have ever taken. And I have to say, this includes some of the Israel tours that we've taken. I think it was up to par, if not maybe a little bit more informative and revelatory, and just a wonderful, wonderful time that we had in Turkey. But yes, we learned a great deal of history since Turkey holds, as many of you know, significant biblical events. And we'll probably talk about some of these, mostly about Noah's Ark today, but um, Abraham's time in Haran, Noah's Ark resting place, the seven churches in the book of Revelation. I highly recommend for our viewers to visit Turkey and to get in touch with Andrew. But Andrew, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for taking the time to sit with me today. So I appreciate them so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to share what we're doing out here, and I'm so happy to see you and hear you. It brings back great memories from our tour with your church group, and I can't wait to have you guys back. So,
Yeah, I know we talked at length about not just Turkey, we talked about Egypt, and we talked about a
yes,
lot of places to possibly go visit in the future. So we'll see what the Lord has in
yeah,
store for us. But it was certainly one of those more memorable trips, I have to say, that we've ever taken. Challenges that we had, but at the same time, all those challenges aside,
yeah,
we had a
yeah.
phenomenal time, didn't we?
Spicy or non-spicy?
Yes. We have this
Uh,
inside joke with our 42 group member tour that we took, right? And
yeah,
this inside thing was all about
the
spicy
Turkish
kebab
food.
or
Yes,
no spicy kebab.
yeah.
By our 13th day of the tour, we were given the option yet again, spicy kebab or no spicy kebab. And we were already like, no kebab, no
Yes, that
spicy
was
kebab.
all the memories.
Yes,
Yeah,
indeed. It was memorable, memorable. But let's get right into it today. I'm
yeah.
super excited about touching on the subjects. I see the pictures you have behind you. We're
Hmm.
going to talk about a lot about Noah's Ark. But you and I recorded several mini recordings throughout our tour in different areas in Turkey, different locations that we, took mini videos here and there.
Hmm.
And you were so gracious to do that. I know that everybody wanted to get your ear and talk to you about certain things, but I appreciate you
Yeah.
taking the time to do that. And as I mentioned, I'm actually still in the process of gathering up some of those videos and sharing more content
Mm.
on my YouTube channel and on podcasts and whatnot. But within the next few months, I already did one, which was really good. But can you share with us how you first got started in this research of Noah's Ark?
Oh. Yeah, wow. So, I live here now, but when I was in middle school, so maybe 13 or 14 years old, a guy named Ron Wyatt came out to my town. He was a nurse anesthetist from Tennessee, but he was also a biblical researcher and explorer, and he was investigating these different sites across the Middle East. Some of them he discovered himself, and others he was just investigating what other people had found. That included the Noah's Ark site. And
Mhm.
so one of his lectures was in my hometown of Sacramento. This was the early 90s. And I remember it was a Thursday night, so it was a school night. I really wanted to hear what he had to say about his different claims. And so I asked my father to go to the meeting and come back and report back to me.
Mhm.
And my dad, he was willing to do it. And it was a school night for me, so I had homework. And my dad came back and said, "Wow, well, this guy said he found Noah's Ark and the Red Sea crossing and Mount Sinai." And so I looked up his name, and he had a book for sale, a really small paperback called "Discover Noah's Ark." And so I bought it, and I read it, but it was very brief information about each of his claims. And I really wanted to dive into it, so I decided I'm going to call him. Now, this is before email and the internet. This is in the
Mhm.
early 90s. So I dialed 411 and I asked the operator to see if there's a phone number for Ronald Wyatt. And he had a P.O. box in the front of the book. So I knew the city. I said Madison, Tennessee. And the person, the operator said, yeah, I can connect you right through to him if you want, or dial his number. I said, okay. So
Those
I
411 days, huh?
yes, yes. I mean, for those who never tried it, I don't know if it still works. No,
I don't
but
think so.
and this is before even unlimited minutes, so that got me in trouble for my parents later. They saw the
Mm.
phone bill, but that first call was very brief. Ron had just walked in the door, I guess, from one of his trips to Israel. They call me back tomorrow, and so I did, and then the next day it started a conversation that lasted until he died in 1999. I would talk to him for hours on the phone. People who worked with him, like David Fazold and Dr. Bill Shea, other people I would write letters to, just to even those who said it was not Noah's Ark, just to see like what they know and just to compare notes. And I was just really into it. So by the time I was in graduated from high school and in early days of college in 95 and 96, Ron came out to Sacramento again. We invited him twice, and he did another series of meetings both those years. And then in 97, a friend of mine that I met on the internet, Bill Fry, who knew Ron and had been on one of his earlier tours to Noah's Ark, he called me and said, hey, I want to go back to Noah's Ark. Could you join me? I need a travel companion. I said, sure. And so I talked to my parents because I didn't have the money, and they loaned me the money, and off I went. So we had like a 4 or 5, no, actually 5 day adventure out here. It was my first trip. It was in 1997 to June of
Wow.
'97 to Noah's Ark, and I was blown away not only just with the culture and the people, the friendliness, but also the evidence, of course, for Noah's Ark. And I knew I had to research this more and get more involved. But it wasn't until 2000, 3 years later, that the year after Ron had passed away, that a friend of mine said he was organizing this trip across the Middle East to see all the different sites that Ron was investigating and asked me to join him and do documentation. And so I borrowed some friends' cameras and I went twice to the Noah's Ark site that year and that summer, 2000. And that was my first time I met Dr. Salih Tutan, the Turkish geologist who has been studying this site. He's still alive and he's helping us on our current project. But Dr. Salih, as I call him, as a professor of geology, he's been studying this region the longest anyone I know of for that, his field of expertise in geology. And I met him in 2000. And then I just kind of lost contact and didn't go back to Turkey until 2013. I was doing others, like I was on archaeological excavations in Jerusalem for 3 or 4 years. And but then I finally came back and reconnected with some of the old friends out here. And then a couple of years after that, I met up with Dr. Salih again. Um, and yeah, so it's kind of an interest as a child in archaeology. It grew into like a serious hobby. I got my education and training in computer science and programming, and so when I went to work, I was just dealing with programming computers. But every summer, I would save my money to go off to the Middle East to do an excavation almost every summer. But it wasn't until more recently, in fact, it was 2019 that we actually did our own investigation of the site using radar and LiDAR and thermal cameras.
Mhm.
Um, and then we also, then in 2021, we're here when the Turks were involved and helped with that expedition when they did ERT scans. And I was here in 2014 for John Larson's ERT scans. So it's kind of blossomed and exploded into this full-time thing now, where when the pandemic hit, I decided to stay here, and a friend had a place for me to stay, and I said, well, I don't know how long the borders will stay open.
Mhm.
I'm only 30 minutes from the Ark site. And it was a great decision, a good one looking back on it. And so now I was able to make more contacts with the Turkish officials, get more involved with the local tourism industry, and just help promote the site and build up that visitor center and renovate it and get correct information in it. Because now we have every day, it depends on the day, but average sometimes 75 to 100 people a day coming through.
That's
Because you
wonderful.
now have Turkish tourism companies who take people to Mount Ararat to climb, which is a big tourist thing to do here.
Mhm.
They now get them on their day off to come over here. So after the climb, you have all these tourists from Europe and America and Asia coming through, and they're now learning about Noah's Ark when normally people would have done it on their own as
Wow.
part of their itinerary with these tour companies. And so we're getting all sorts of people today. Well, yesterday we had a couple Scottish people come through, or one lady who was just really involved and into the research, so she knew a lot. It was fun talking to her, and this passion to share. I'm not always there, but the posters we have on the walls, the videos we have, the fossil artifacts there, it's all testifying to the what we've done there, what Ron Wyatt did, and others in the research showing that this is Noah's Ark.
Wow, what a trajectory, what a story from, just being in high school to where you are now and how God has just brought you through all of these, you know, places and history. And I mean, I have to believe that God instilled in you such a desire to want to learn more, want to know more. I mean, you had mentioned that you were a born again believer, you believed in Jesus, you knew the Bible story. So that had to have been something that God just put in your heart for you to just, I mean, study this, follow it, research it, finally live there where you are now. It's so fascinating. Your story is so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I never planned it. Like, I guess, most of us in our lives, we're going down different paths. We don't
Yeah.
plan like every little, like, for 10-year plan. I don't know people who have that type of plan, but maybe there are people. For
Yeah.
me, it was what happened when the pandemic hit, and I was already the year before, so it was 2018, 19, I mean. We had just done the GPR scans in
Mhm.
October, and we had a science channel here, and that was the whole story where God opened the doors and arranged for the professional video team and to put on cable TV across the U.S. and the other countries that show the Science Channel, which is owned by Discovery. So it was on different channels, and they filmed the work, and we found amazing things that even recently we're still getting data out of that results that are showing that there's a
Mm.
unique structure below the ground at the boat site.
Mhm.
And so, I didn't think I would be this closely involved. It was more of a personal passion and interest,
Right.
like going to this site, taking pictures. But then people wanted me to share it. They said, "Hey, well, you've gone to this site a couple times, or you've been to
Yeah.
like Mount Sinai in Arabia. Tell us about it." So I started doing church meetings. And then as I got more involved like that, people, I guess, when God opens the doors and you walk through and start sharing, he gives you more opportunities to
Right.
share.
Yeah.
And so, soon it became, hey, can we go with you? So then I started doing tours. Um, but being able to live here, I still, can't believe it. There are ups and downs in the sense that, uh, you know, inconveniences, or you got to get used to the culture here and how they do things. I'm used to
Mhm.
like the California life, where it's just like fast paced. Here
Mhm.
it's a little slower, and you just are kind of enjoying it and trying to get something done. It might take a month or two.
Mhm.
Uh, but you don't have your like one stop shop like convenience stores where everything's there, Walmart or Costco.
Mhm.
But those to me, I'm willing to trade all that because I'm only 30 minutes from the Arc site. And today we went with this professor. I mean, I was out here. I'm out here with a professor of the church history from North Georgia or North Carolina. Anyways, we decided, okay, that we had extra time. Let's go back to the Arc site. It's only 30 minutes away. We were at the Arzap village most of the day. So we go back to the Arc site, and we meet a Danish, like almost 30 or 40 members. They had two buses, a
Mhm.
Danish tour group. So we briefly talked to them, and it's just amazing that I don't know uh, if I understand completely why I'm here in the sense that
Mhm.
I'm taking it for granted, but to think I can just drive 30 minutes and see the oldest ship in the world.
Yeah.
And this object that Christ even brings out the story is applying to the end times in the days of
Yes.
Noah. Sometimes it's hard to believe it. I don't really think about it too much. It's just more of a daily grind kind of thing as we get used to our lives wherever we're at in the world, trying to get things done that you think God has called you to do, and you're
Mhm.
in our next phase of our research project.
Mhm.
But it is a blessing when I look back and like, wow, I'm here, and this is where civilization restarted.
Yes.
I can't imagine. I never saw this happening.
Yeah. And not to mention that you meet people from all over the world. And
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah.
yeah, and that's pretty incredible to me too, because if you think about it, several years back, that wasn't a thing, right? That wasn't a thing to do.
Yeah.
Now you get the opportunity to whether there are believers or non-believers, what skeptics or non-skeptics that go, you still get the opportunity to share,
Yeah.
and this is I think that that's something that we need to keep in the forefront of our minds too, because God places us in positions a lot of times where he's going to use you. You're going to be his tool, you're going to be his vessel. And like you said, a lot of times we take it for granted and we don't really know the full scope, the full measure of what God is doing with us, right? We're just willing vessels,
No.
but we don't understand it. And I think that he's placed you there for a purpose. I really do. I believe that with all my heart.
Well, I do, and I see certain things going on with the Ark research. So much drama on the backside, like negative stuff, and then you have this, awesome things God is doing with the research and being able to share, like you mentioned, with worldwide audience, with people coming here that usually in the past that was not the thing. You know, I think it's gone to the point where God has set up everything in motion that whatever we're going to do there and whatever new research and new discovery is going to have the maximum impact on the world. It's very, the site's very impactful, not just for local people,
Mhm.
Turkish people coming out there, but also, like you mentioned, these tour companies now including this site on their itinerary. And so that was not a thing in the past. Those who showed up were those who were really into the drop on our research or
Mhm.
saw a
Mhm.
Ron Wyatt video or whatever. But now these are people who don't even know the story of Noah and the flood. They could be atheist, agnostic. I had a cultural tour group come through from Japan. We have Taiwanese
Mhm.
groups coming through because they like Turkish history and they've just seen something new. These companies, Turkish companies, are adding the Ark site to the itinerary.
Mhm.
So it's amazing when you meet these people. This is all new information to them. When the Japanese company or tour group came through, they were so interested in the science behind it and what we're doing, even though they were not a Christian group. And they all wanted to take selfies with me. So it's kind of a strange thing, and they were really big on almost every single one of these Japanese couples that were there. I had to get a picture with them with their iPhone, whatever. And so it was cool, but I wasn't used to that. But but they were it wasn't just they take pictures, let's go. They actually watched the video. They had questions. They
Mhm.
listened to my little lecture about the like geophysical surveys we've done and what Ron
Mhm.
Wyatt did. And I just kept thinking, wow, I hope this plants a seed. They didn't speak English, but they had a translator. But you just don't know what type of information you're giving that will have an impact later down the road for them,
That's right.
for whoever it is. I've met atheists out there. I've definitely, definitely there's Muslims and Christians, different
Mhm.
denominations out there.
Mhm.
But seeing the worldwide impact, that's something new.
Right.
And that's amazing because I remember my first trip here, it was an empty building, a couple chairs inside this. And it
Mm.
was kind of, this was 10 years after they built it in 97, because they built it in 1987 and it was nothing in the business center. We put up these little small posters that Ron White gave us because there's nothing inside. And when he found out we were going, he gave us posters to print, and so we unrolled them and stuck them on the wall. But they're just small, maybe 12 by 18-inch size posters. You have this huge empty building with a couple tables and chairs. That was it. And so by the time I started getting involved back in 2013, and I came back to Turkey again, it was a rundown visitor center, water damage, paint peeling, nothing. The tables and chairs were gone.
Yeah.
The posters, there's some on the wall. But then when the Turkish government then renovated the building in 2017, 18, and they made it all inside like wood panels, and they tried to fix different things, but they took everything down. So there was like now nothing in this building. People coming here, and so I told a local friend, we need to, get control of this, rent it, whatever, lease it. And finally, it worked out that the government decided, okay, we'll turn this over to the local village, and then they can do whatever they need to do with it. And then we teamed up with the local village, and that enabled us by 2022 to put all this stuff out there so that the world, these people coming through, and a lot of them are making their own videos too. And so that their audience is being reached via YouTube or Instagram or TikTok.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so now the word's spreading through all these other people. And I saw one of the guys from Ancient Aliens, Andrew Collins, is that his name? One of the guys who's been on that History Channel show, on his tour, they now included the Noah's Ark site, and they're tying it to Göbekli Tepe and this
Like that.
prehistory and these mysteries of Eastern Turkey and Urartu
Mhm.
sites in Van. Even though it's not, I wouldn't consider all correct information. In a totally different audience they're trying to reach.
Sure.
That's great because they're coming to the visitor center and they're seeing what
Sure.
we put in there, which has the Bible story.
There you
And
go.
so, yeah, so however God brings the people, whether it's online or they physically come out there through whoever,
Yeah.
we're doing our best to get the information out. And so it's totally new. Before this was not an opportunity to do that. So now we have this opportunity
Yeah.
and God has blessed it. So we
Yeah.
hope to continue this.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Why do you think though, I want to get into your head. And I know we talked a little bit about that while we were on tour, but
Okay.
explain to the audience why do you think this is the actual landing site of
Yeah.
Noah's Ark compared to others, like you mentioned just
Yeah.
a little while ago with Mount Ararat, others
Yeah.
opinion about it being on Mount Ararat, which by the
Yeah.
way, when you're there at the visitor center and you're touring, the site that you see behind Andrew, you have a clear view on a clear day. You have a
Wow.
clear view of Mount
Beautiful.
Ararat, which is absolutely spectacular. It's stunning to
Yeah.
witness. But what was that convincing factor for you? Because I mean, yes, you started researching this or you started really getting into this back in the day when you were in
Yeah.
high school, a teenager, and then through your adult life. But what were some, because I can't imagine it being just one, but what was one of those or several of those determining factors for you that made you believe, you know what, this has to be it?
Well, when I initially heard the claims, even before I got to know Ron, I know my father had a number of books in his library. He loved books, and it was like
Mhm.
now like books. So he had a pretty good sized library. So growing up, he had books because he was stationed in Turkey during the 70s in the U.S. Air Force, and so he brought back books from his travels. And then he bought when he became a Christian, right before I was born, he um, I bought other books like on archaeology, and so I had this love for books, and one of them that he owned was called the Ark File or Ark File by Rennie Norbergen, and this guy was actually on when was the reporter on the 1960 expedition to the site.
Oh.
So his 19, I think the book was originally published in 76. So 20, 15 years later or so, after that 60 expedition, he wrote this Ark File book, and it had one or two photographs of the site. It had a chapter about his trip with everyone out there, and I remember that was in there. So it's kind of like a mystery. I saw that as a kid in the photographs of the boat shape. I was interested in archaeology in general, so even the stories of the Ark on Ararat, as a kid, you don't consider like, okay, do they make sense or not? You just like, wow, this is great. And so it was all, and I remember even watching this old film about all the eyewitness accounts of the Ark on Ararat that was produced by some Christian filmmakers back in the late 70s. And so this this interest was in there. So when I heard Ron's claims about doing further research on the Dropener site, I was really interested and had to get to the bottom of it as much as I could. And so I had lots of questions for Ron when he took my phone calls, and then when he came out twice to California in person. So when I first came out here, besides all the being paranoid because Ron got us really scared, so don't be careful, don't get killed or kidnapped or whatever. So he had a lot of stories for us and things to watch out for. So we were very paranoid. I remember a lot of funny stories on that trip. But seeing the site for the first time, the first thing you see is this like distinct object. It's on the side of the mountain. It's not like there's a whole bunch of these different boat shapes all over, unlike what some people claim. Um, there isn't, and so when you're there and you're looking at the site, you're like, okay, you got a boat shape, and then you look at this biblical story. The Bible gives basic dimensions, but not every little detail. Moses, when he
Yeah.
wrote Genesis, doesn't tell us like how many bedrooms or where they slept or what part of the boat was the toilets, or how many rooms for the animals. Nothing. It gives us the basic dimensions. Says there are three decks, one door, and one window. And it was wood. It's like the type of wood, and that they had a sealant like bitumen or pitch that sealed the boat, but every other detail is not, the complete blueprint of the ark is not there. So you can say people attack this, but the best design for a ship in the open seas is a ship shape, not a barge. And so then you start thinking about, well, all these people claim they saw Noah's Ark up in the volcano, and it is the tallest mountain. So, logically, if you're thinking as the floodwaters goes down, the first mountain peak in this area that would pop up would be Mount Ararat because it's the tallest peak in Turkey. It's over 16,000 feet high. And
Mhm.
this site where it's currently at is about 6,500 feet. So you have 10,000 more feet of the Ararat mountain across the valley. Well, then you start digging into it. That's where I started buying books by Earl Cummings and these other Ark writers, people writing about the accounts. And I started getting in contact with David Fazold, who did a great job rebutting a lot of these older tales and so-called eyewitness accounts. And I started realizing, oh wow, there's a lot of what do you call it? Discrepancies between all the claims. Some say it was on the north side of the Ahora Gorge. Others say it's at this 1,000 foot elevation. Others at this one. Others say it's a complete barge, perfectly preserved. They saw it as a kid, like the Hagopian story. And others say, oh no, it's broken in two, and one part of it's by a lake on the near the summit. So you just had all these issues, and no one seemed to care. They just collected all these stories and said, oh, the Ark is way up on this volcano.
Mhm.
And so then you get into the geology, and I started realizing, well, that mountain that they're looking at is a post-flood volcano. It wasn't even around for Noah's Ark to land on. It's a composite or stratovolcano. So all these eruptions have built it since the time of the flood to where its current height is at 16,000 feet. So those who say they saw the ark in the outside layer of this mountain, the very outside surface, at halfway up the mountain or two-thirds, it makes zero sense because that means the very last eruption didn't destroy the ark, and the ark somehow stayed on the outside of it when the lava would have actually covered it and pushed it all the way to the bottom and buried it.
Mhm.
And so there's all these issues, and that made the case stronger for the Drupanar site. So it was more than just, okay, the Drupanar site has all these factors in its favor. It was also, well, you have to show that these other claims didn't make any sense, that they had a lot of issues. And people weren't really doing that. They were willing to, in the 80s especially, you had these competing tour groups and expeditions, late 70s and 80s, who were looking for Noah's Ark, mainly on Ararat at that time. Now there's less people doing that. But they were definitely kind of like a competition thing to raise their funds and get people interested in their expedition. They would attack Ron Wyatt and the Drupanar site, the boat formation across the valley. And so I was, as a kid, I was fascinated by doing all this research, talking to these people. But I was able to, I wasn't just like a groupie following whatever Ron Wyatt claimed or whoever. I wanted to investigate and talk to even those who say
Mhm.
it's not the Noah's Ark. And that made the case for me stronger because as I investigated it, even through high school and college and actually coming out here, I realized, hey, we have the basic information about this site should get everyone interested. Yet people are writing it off and then just outright attacking it and not answering this basic information of we have a ship shape that's in the mountains of Ararat. And, the Bible is very clear. It's a range of mountains. Genesis 8:4, it says mountains, plural. So we're in the area of Ararat, which comes from the name Urartu. So this was an ancient kingdom that covered eastern Turkey, parts of Armenia and Iran, but mainly eastern Turkey. And it was a mountainous kingdom. So the ark could land on any of these peaks in this area. So to me, it's in the right location. And then what really seals it, and I've been here on a couple expeditions, even on our tour groups, where we had people measure the ark. I've
Mhm.
seen it measure with laser and with a tape measure on the ground. You can basically measure on Google Earth yourself too, and it comes out to be 300 Egyptian cubits,
Mhm.
which is what Genesis, chapter 6 says for the actual length. And so we don't know what's left of the depth for the height of the ark because it's buried. You're kind of on the top of it.
Mhm.
But it really, to me, having a ship shape on the side of a mountain and the kingdom of Urartu in Ararat, that is exactly the length of Noah's Ark.
Mhm.
That should be right there, a red flag for everyone to like, whoa, check out this site. And
Mhm.
when I saw people ignoring it and try to, they say, well, it's a geological formation. Okay, well, what formation forms a boat like this? It happens to be exactly Noah's Ark. What's a coincidence that would be the case? There was no good explanation. They always came down and say, well, we don't believe Ron White because he said he found Mount Sinai or this or that. I said, no, let's not talk about the other stuff. Let's look at the information for Noah's Ark,
Mhm.
this Drupanar site, and just looking at the facts, the basic information suggests that we should pay attention and do more research and not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars climbing a volcano, 17 miles north that wasn't around during the flood. And now, if you look at things online about the state of the Ark expeditions and Ark hunters, very few are looking now on Ararat. You have people now going to the Muslim site, Judi Da, and 200 miles or whatever, 200 miles south of here in Sirnak province by the Iraqi border. So you have a shift in focus and fragmentation of the Ark search. Now, those who used to look for the Ark on Ararat, like Answers to Genesis and ICR, now that like ICR, they have an article suggesting that the Ark could be on this sedimentary ridge of mountains going west from Ararat. Well, guess what? We're on a sedimentary ridge. So we're even matching where the arc is on these layers, the
Hmm.
sedimentary layers that are up in our site. We're in some of these layers that these creation geologists are writing about, like in the geological column, which layer is what phase of the flood? The flood was, over a year at least they were in the ark. But
Hmm.
certain phases, like when they had a lot of rain, and then the water started receding, and everything dried up, and so they're looking at these layers, and they're saying, okay, it has to be. I don't remember, so I don't want to say, but it was a certain layer. When I looked at Dr. Salih Barak Tutan, the Turkish geologist, who's not a Christian, but he's a Muslim, and he believes in the flood story, though, when he tells me, hey, Andrew, like this is sedimentary rock, that's limestone. This right here is from this time period, whatever, like the Cretaceous. And suddenly it's matching these other creation articles, but they're looking at another location, but the exact same geological column that's on our site. So, well, this matches, but they're ignoring our site. I'm like, hey, the Drupner site's actually on the right layer that you guys are saying was the final stage of the flood. So that's ICR. And then Answers in Genesis. Now they put out articles by Dr. Snelling, who says Mount Ararat is a post-flood volcano built up on sedimentary deposits laid down by the flood. So they've looked at the core drills that other scientists have done, evolutionists, and they see, okay, under the Ararat plain, where Mount Ararat's at, there's thousands of feet of sedimentary deposits from from water. And so on top of that is where the mountain was formed, but the mountain was formed after the flood had gone away. And so now most geologists in the creation world will realize that, okay, you can't have the ark up there. I don't care what the different eyewitness accounts say, it's not there at all. And so it's a combination for me of looking at some of these claims of people saying they saw it up there, to looking at this site and just seeing, okay, we have 300 cubit long boat. It's in the right shape as a boat should be, best designed for the open storm, for the open seas with a storm. And it's in the mountains of Ararat.
Hmm.
So that's just the very basic information without going into even the soil tests people have done, the GPR scans looking under the ground, that give further weight in my mind that this is the final resting place of Noah's Ark and the best candidate. I have people who say, well, okay, I really think it's on this other place, or I really think it's over there. They leave comments on my YouTube videos, which is fine, but no one has ever sent me one location that I can go walk to and look at or take a photo of, or sent me a photograph of another site. At
Hmm.
least this site I can drive up to. I can walk down the valley from the visitor center. I can do, anyone can go do and do that. You don't have to go on any tour. You can do it yourself. You can go do your own, if the Turks allow you, you can do your own research on the site. It's a known boat-shaped site right there. It's not well, we don't have a boat, but that's not Noah's Ark. Check out this other mountain, but we don't have a site on this other mountain, like Judy. Um, People say it's on there, but that's the site, Judy Da, Mountain of Judy, that's in the Quran. But okay, what do you have there that shows that Noah's Ark? Oh, well, nothing really. There's
Hmm.
no like physical site for me to go check. In the past, and I'll wrap up this question here, but my answer to this question, but in the past, it was very easy in the 60s and 70s to look at those old eyewitness accounts, the stories.
Hmm.
And people would come back from Eastern Turkey. It's like a Wild West area. One guy will say, hey, I saw the piece of Noah's Ark, or I saw the Ark. And these old stories will go to the churches, and people do presentations and write books, and no one would question it because there's no way to double check what they say. It was unlike today. If you say Noah's Ark is up on Ararat, okay, what side of the mountain is on? I'm going to zoom in with Google Earth. There was
Hmm.
no Google Earth back then, and I'm going to check what you just said, or I'm going to climb the mountain because back then you couldn't climb it. Now it's a tourist attraction out here, and trekkers can easily climb Mount Ararat for sometimes free. They can do these groups. Some of the days they have group tours for free. Go up the mountain for 3 days, or sometimes $100 to $500 to go up 3 to 5 day tour. But you have thousands of people now climbing Ararat, and you don't have not one of those tourists going up come down and say, "Hey, we found Noah's Ark."
Right.
You know, so it's amazing the opportunity with global satellite coverage, looking down on these very clear images from Google Earth and other satellite vendors to tourists walking all over that mountain, and no one's seeing anything. It's
Hmm.
not hidden anymore. Plus, now that glacier that's on top has shrunk over almost 30%, I believe it is. from the 70s until now, when they've looked at the satellite images, they've seen the year-round glacier up there that some people say the Ark is in, it keeps shrinking.
Mm.
And so there's less and less places people can say the so-called Ark on Ararat can hide. Yet right across the valley from Ararat, lower elevation, is a perfectly preserved boat that the futures to me suggest that this is, the real Noah's Ark.
Yeah, I remember you sharing with us, and you took us there, as a matter of fact, not far from there. I mean, there's so much to unpack and everything that you said, but I recall the reason I say this is for the audience to understand that the landing site where it's at now is where it's believed that it finally rested, right? So, because it's believed that it initially landed just some feet above where you are at now, or in other words, where the resting place of Noah's Ark is right now. So, can you kind of like unpack that a little bit? Because I
Yeah,
recall us talking as well about how it was Ron Wyatt, I believe it was, right, that saw up on that mountain ridge area, he saw some hieroglyphics that nobody's really seen necessarily or taken pictures of or whatever, but he did say he saw something like that not far from there, which I would love for you to talk about as well, is where we see a big rock formation, and that is the rock that is believed to have been the rock where Noah walked towards with his family to offer up a sacrifice when the flood was over. Can you kind of like unpack that a little bit so that people understand where, like, the pictures right behind you is the resting place. It's not like boom, it landed right there where you're
yeah.
discussing. It was more up a few feet above you.
Yeah, so the mountain range that we're in, where the Ark is in, is called, some people call it the Tinderick Mountains, as a nearby volcano, just west of the site. And so this small mountain range is not as tall as Ararat,
Mhm.
um, but this area is actually sedimentary rock that's been pushed up. You have different layers of fossils. We showed you guys some of the fossil sites
Mhm.
there. You have fossilized coral, sand dollars. By the way, just yesterday, no, yesterday we went to the fossil site with his professor, and I told him, hey, it's very hard to find like fossils you can pick up that's completely preserved, like the sand dollars. You can find bits and pieces of seashells. I said, I think all the trips I've been out there, I found maybe four sand dollars, and I've given most away, and I have one, back in California.
Mhm.
Um, and so we're walking from this fossil, the site with all these fossils embedded in a rock that you can't pull out. And I told him that. And as we're almost back to the car, I looked down and in the dirt, just kind of sticking up, if you know what a sand dollar is, it's that kind of circular type of
Mhm.
animal. Then they wash up on the beach around the world. And it was the top part. And I touched it with my foot a little bit. And no, like a bigger section of soil moved. So I knew it was loose and not just embedded in a hard rock. I called the professor over and I said, here, this is for you. It's a special gift. Dig that up. That's a complete sand dollar. So he brushed off
Yeah.
the dirt because only a little part was, the little pattern. I can tell what it was.
Yeah.
And so he dug it up, and sure enough, one of the rare sand dollars. He
No,
wanted to give it to me. I said, no, no, you take it back and share with everyone what you've seen here.
that's
Um,
beautiful.
but yeah, so this mountain range, that's the sedimentary rock full of fossils and coral and everything. It's with that now, this little mountain range, the Ark is halfway up. Basically, it's at 6,500 feet. It's 1,500 feet off the valley floor, which is about 5,000 foot elevation, like a mile high. But the top of the mountain range, with its, you can say, the summit of these little peaks, is close to 8,000 feet, a little over 8,000 feet. And I've been up there on the border. That's the Iranian-Turkish border
Mm.
area. And if I remember looking at my photos, the data that's embedded will give you the elevation. It'll show, like, my photos I've taken at the top are about 8,000 foot elevation. And so if you think of logically the flood story, the Ark is going to land, pretty much as soon as the mountain peaks show up. Within a certain number of days, it seems like the Ark finally rests. Like, once there's dry ground for it to connect with a mountain or like kind of be sucked into a little area like a harbor, and as the water went down, it's going to rest there. So that's higher up on the mountain range. So I think if you look at where the Ark is now and the top being 8,000 feet, right below the summit are a couple areas, one where Ron was looking at, and the other To the east of that is another location where Dr. Sally was looking, and David Fazold. And so that's about 1,500 feet higher is the top. So a little below that are these at least two or three sites people have proposed for the original landing. And then you say, well, how did it get down to where it's at now? Well, if you look at Google satellite images today, or visually come here and look at it, or look at the old photos from the site, you'll see it sitting in an earth flow. Some people call it a mud flow, but this mudslide or earth flow, this unstable part of the mountainside collapsed, and it channeled all this material, debris,
Mhm.
and mud and rocks down the
Mhm.
mountainside, and it brought the ark with it. You can
Mhm.
follow it. You can backtrack up the mountain where this flow started, where the instability started. Is very near the summit, a couple locations, and those two, especially two big branches of this earth flow or mud flow, connects right where the ark is today in this narrow channel between two hills, and that's where it got stuck and stayed. So if you're visualizing it, think of the flood is receding, the water's going down, the ark is going to obviously, ground itself nearer to the top of a mountain than the bottom. And so, but the reason why it's in the middle of the elevation for this mountain range is because it's in this earth flow that brought it down. We don't know when. We do know that the site first appeared in the late 40s, 48 or
Mhm.
49. We've interviewed some of the locals just a couple months ago. We finally got on camera and one guy who was 10 or 11, maybe 9 or 10 at the time. And he said, remember the day that because before the mountainside became all unstable and full of ravines, it was smooth ground. The topography was smooth. They could do farming. They would grow, and it had grass growing there. They just cut the grass down for like natural hay for the animals. Then, right after this one earthquake, he was 9 or 10 or 11 years old. The whole thing turned into this unstable earth flow full of big cracks in the earth and ravines. So they couldn't obviously farm there anymore. But except for this one spot was smooth, which was the boat shaped formation,
Mm.
and they didn't think much of it, or they, there's no, this is no late 40s after World War II. They're not thinking, let's call let's get this on Instagram to take a selfie with it. You
Mhm.
didn't have that ability back then. So it was kind of hidden news. No one really cared or knew about it until about 10 years later, 1959. They're doing these aerial photographs of the whole region or the whole country, basically, because that year Turkey joined NATO. And so now Turkey is now bordering the then Soviet Union. So this is very important. This area of the world, because the Soviets, the Russians, were right on the other side. Armenia and Georgia were Soviet republics, and so we're very close to that location, those borders. And so this became really sensitive area for them to document. And so that's how the world found out about it, was because of that initial photograph in 1959 that got released. So the mountain is sedimentary rock. The area we're in is a very unstable part of the mountain that brought it down. And so that's why it's at its current location.
Yeah, and so therefore the resting place where it is currently right now,
Yeah,
and those two
exactly.
pictures you see right behind you, that in that black and white one that we see right there you go. That's the one you're talking about. That's the one initially that was
Well,
shown in the 40s.
no one has any photo. This is just a guy telling what he remembers as a kid, what it was like before. So and for those who are not listening but watching, when he was a child, he said the whole mountainside was like this very smooth. You could
Okay,
grow grass on it.
right.
Outside of it, same thing. The whole mountainside was just, hilly and smooth. After the earthquake in 48 or 49, everything around it became all rough terrain. The whole mountainside had this change, except for this boat shape, which was still smooth. Again, that was 48 or 49, but it was not, this photo is actually 61 photograph.
Okay,
But in
okay,
1959, the first photo, high altitude, was taken. This is a lower altitude photo taken by Ara Güler, a Turkish photographer that the
okay.
military brought in. So that's the 61 photograph, but it looked the same as in the 59 photo.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Over here is more modern. This might be 2019 or 20,
mm-hmm.
my drone photo. And you can see how the shape is still there, but the hillside has changed even further, and
Yeah.
now we know that it was a 1968 earthquake, a 5.6 the Richter scale, hit about 10 miles south of here across the Iranian side.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually dropped the soil away from most of the object. Like three-quarters of it have now huge, up to like 30-foot high walls exposed because the soil around it fell away and dropped down and almost like pushed it up. And so you had almost a natural exposure of the arc site. So God did his way. to get it even
Mhm.
more pronounced, and now we can access even the sides of the boat to see what's going on with the rib timbers or the hull of the ship. So yeah.
Tell us a little bit about some of the, not necessarily excavations, because excavations haven't been made, but more of some of the research that has been done. I remember you saying that there was an archaeologist, I believe it was a woman, right, who came and she did some research on that, and she did it pro bono, if I'm not mistaken. So tell the audience a little bit about that, because I mean, we can believe that it is. We can, you know, see that the length of it is goes in line with what the biblical narrative is. We see the ridges. We see that it's in the mountains or the mountain range of Ararat. Just so many things that we can piece to the puzzle. But in fact, there have been some research that have been done
Hmm.
aside from some of the ones that you've said. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? That would really do, confirm that this could very well be the resting place and that this is Noah's Ark.
Yeah, so if when you look at the site itself, it's a dirt site. You're on a dirt-shaped object. You have boulders embedded in it and different types of rocks. You have grass growing on it. You can see in this photograph on my right side behind me. Um, the critics will pounce and say, well, because of these stories in the past, and they saw a perfectly preserved, rectangular barge in the ice flow in Ararat. This idea that suddenly Noah's Ark is going to defy decay, unless God wanted to do it that way, he could. But as a natural wooden object on Earth, it's going to decay over time.
Yeah.
Depends on what preservation it's in already with the pitch that could help stop it, maybe, or the type of wood. We don't know what type of wood gopher wood is. Some say cypress, but at any rate, slowly over time, any wooden object will decay. So when you see this site, you're like, okay, it's a dirt shape. Is it the imprint like of the hull, and that's what all we have left? Like the hull was there and then it decayed away, and you have this ship shape for the bottom part. Possible, or is it actually buried now, and what's underground has affected what you see above ground? And
Mhm.
that's to me more likely.
Mhm.
And because when you look at other ancient boats that decayed over time, you look at late Bronze Age ships like time of the Exodus, Greek Roman ships up to like Viking ships, Byzantine ships. I saw this article about the harbor in Constantinople, Istanbul, that is now on dry ground, but they've excavated a couple of years ago, and they found I think a dozen hulls of because it was a harbor for the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, and so they now have these whatever's left of the wooden hull exposed as the archaeologists dig down. And this is what you should expect to find for Noah's Ark. That you'll find whatever state of preservation's in, it's not going to be a perfectly preserved boat. And so things below the ground, especially that used to be water and they get covered up, over time, dust and dirt come in, mud flows happen, things will cover a decaying ship that then it becomes part of the soil. And whatever's below the ground will affect what you see above the ground. So now we have a ship shape on the top. So how do we look into it since excavations have not been done?
Mhm.
So there's technology out there that almost like X-ray or sonar that
Mhm.
will let you peer below the soil and you can interpret the results.
Mhm.
But it'll give you an idea of what's going on. Now, if the critics are right that this is a natural formation, whether it's a solid rock, which it is not, because you walk on its dirt, and then or if it's just dirt that built up around a bunch of rocks like basement rock or bedrock, as the like the mud coming down the mountainside hit a big boulder, it formed somehow a ship shape. If that's the case, then the data, like what you see below the ground with radar
Mhm.
and the soil tests we've done, it should all be the same. But what's outside? Because there's just mud flowing around a rock. So there should be nothing distinct or unique inside the ship shape versus right outside on the hillside, on the mountainside there. Well, that's not the case. It is distinct. So if you look at the data now, Ron brought in with David Fasold radar. They did radar scans. Salih Tutan did his own. In fact, he said Noah's Ark was the first site in Turkey where they did radar, ground penetrating radar. And this tool is a way that it basically shoots energy waves, electromagnetic waves into the ground thousands of times a second. And as it bounces off the different density of reflects back off the density of different objects, soil versus hard rock or petrified wood or water. It will then come back at different times to the receiver. Whether now it's a computer system, they can 3D collect the data. In the past, it was just like thermal paper they printed out the results on. So you had a hard copy. But then now, what we have today, what we did in 2019, is 3D radar, basically. And so this allows us to see below the soil, like a doctor doing CAT scans on somebody,
Mhm.
without having to actually cut or dig into the soil. And so it's a non-destructive method. But there's more than just radar. You can even use sound waves. You can use microgravity waves. And what the other technique that's been used on Noah's Ark was electrical resistivity, tomography, ERT. And that allows electricity, collect the data about electricity flowing through below the ground, the soil, and as it goes faster or slower through different objects, the computer can collect that data, and then you can make a 3D model later, hopefully, of what's below the ground. And so this information has shown, at least in my mind, that you have a very distinct structure that's unique to the hillside, the mountainside there. And it shows a couple of things. So Ron did radar, and he got reflections, like a whole pattern going across the ship. That even the radar manufacturer, GESSI, New Hampshire company, is still around. But back then, they said on local television, and this was 1985, I think they said this. The BP, he said these are two periodic, meaning like they're two evenly spaced. They happen at even timing. That they found these 12 or 13 reflections that, and we have the printout in the visitor center. So
Mhm.
he said, this can't be natural. This has to be man-made. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that got them interested. They did a complete scan later. Now, when Sally came around 3 years later, and he teamed up with Dr. John Baumgartner, a Christian creationist who was a geophysicist, um, they were able to find that there was a something solid or a different type of material about I think it was 2 or 3 meters below the surface of the whole site. And they also found a double reflection happened further down. I think it was 4 or 5 or 6 meters down. So it's suggesting that there's a solid layer across the
Mhm.
whole site. Noah's Ark had 3 decks. You think the hull is one deck, a middle deck, and then a top deck.
Mhm.
Um, so when we did ours, the 2019 scans was something that God opened the doors for us to do at the right time with the Science Channel there. Perfect weather, crystal clear skies, no rain for the time that they did their work because rain actually ruins GPR
Yeah.
penetration depth. And we did all this, and we turned it over to. They had brought in an archaeologist consultant who knew GPR to interpret the data. These are random people. Even the team we hired, I didn't know who they were. They're not interested in Noah's Ark. They're just there to do a job.
Yeah.
And some of them were atheists, actually. The LiDAR guy was. So the data we give it to them, we don't know what to expect. Then it comes back, and the guy's saying, "Hey, I've seen a series of right angles, 7 meters down or 21 feet." He said, "This is again, like the other guy said, too periodic. Like you don't expect to see right angles like this in nature." He
Mhm.
said, "Of course, I can't determine if it's natural or man-made, but he said if I were doing an excavation, I'll dig right there."
Mhm.
And on that same trip, 3 meters down on the other side of the ship, inside the ship-shaped formation, we're getting parallel and perpendicular lines,
Yeah.
things you don't expect to see in nature that are inside what critics will say just random dirt and rocks. So that was good news. That was on the Science Channel show. Well, when I met up with Sali again, and I think it was 2021, I reconnected with him. I told him, say, "Hey, we did this work without you a couple of years ago, but the original guides are not involved anymore. Do you know somebody who would like interpret this? Other give them all the raw data?" And he said, "Yeah, I know this lady. She's actually a geophysicist, not an archaeologist, but she's originally Greek, but she's an American citizen,
Mhm.
and she has her own company somewhere, I think Connecticut or East Coast." And so I got in contact with her, and she said, yeah, she'll look at this for free. She's friends with Dr. Sally. And so about over 6 months, in her free time, she looked at the data. And again, she had no interest in looking for Noah's Ark. She didn't, I don't know if
Yeah.
she's even Christian, like, who knows. But she came back to me, and this was in the end of 2023. I remember like November, we did a Zoom call, and she said, hey, I don't know if you guys dug a tunnel down the middle, but I'm seeing an opening, I mean, a void that's like air pockets down the middle of the ship shape, starting at the pointed end, going to the middle near the rock you see above ground.
Mhm.
And we were like, what? And like, no, no, we didn't dig anything there. It's in the middle of a mountainside. There's no utility lines, nothing here. And so she then over Zoom, she was showing me these screenshots of her data. Because again, she just took our raw data. We don't know what she's going to find, and now she's finding this whole big, I call the central hallway, about 4 meters down, about 2 meters high, and going all the way down. Like when the ship got covered, this area didn't get filled in or covered, and it leads to another interesting feature on the boat. And this was a central void or cavity, which I call this the atrium. And this was a really deep and large square shaped hole underneath the rock that
Mhm.
goes. It has square shapes on the sides, and it goes down to 13 meters or about 41 feet.
Oh.
And it connects at the top part of it to where this hallway leads, where the level is the same level the hallway is in. And so we're getting very clear, like right to the centimeter data, very high resolution information about what's below the surface. And again, if this is just random information down there, like rocks and dirt, you're not going to find this type of patterns, right angles, parallel lines, perpendicular lines, suggesting, and also, these tunnels and possible rooms still preserved down below. But that's what she pulled out of our original data. So even though, we did all that work, it was a $25,000 a 1 week, 5 day project, but it's still giving us more information even up to today about what's going on below the surface. That's to me showing that this is not a natural object. So that was very exciting. That was 2023. Well, then fast forward to 24 last year, we had an Australian scientist here. And on that trip, it was the same time as right now, on September. I remember looking at the Ark and we were taking pictures. I said, "You guys notice that the grass inside is yellower, different color than the grass right outside the boat?" So I was thinking in my mind, okay, that means there's something different with the soil inside this boat shape. Again, if it's just the same soil building up over a rock, like the outside soil, you should not see a difference. But we could visually see a difference. So I talked to Dr. Sally, who was on that trip with the soil scientists. I said, "Hey, could you guys design a study that where we can get samples and figure out what's going on?" And they were kind of like, "Oh, we don't know," But I said, "Let's just do it." So they finally went out there and they got 88 samples. Now Ron White did get two samples himself in '79 and a couple in '84, but they were very like specific sites. We
Mhm.
got random samples across inside and outside the boat.
Okay.
And so it wasn't because we want to do stats on it. We want to run formulas and see, okay, what's going on, and get averages and all that type of stuff. So you need more than just two samples. So we got 88, and by the end of last year, December, Dr. Solly had it analyzed at Ataturk University, where he used to teach and work at. And the results came in. I remember I was in Switzerland at the time for a couple of months, and I kept bugging him, "Send me the data, like send me the results." Finally, he sent me this blurry photograph over WhatsApp. He takes a picture with his cheap iPhone or Android phone, and I remember it wasn't. I couldn't even read it. I was like, "Oh man, he sent me the data, and this is what I get out of it." And so I told him, "No, send me another one." So then, like 2 days later or so, he sends me a clear photograph. Now I'm not a soil scientist, but I immediately sent it to Bill in Australia to look at it, and then I upload it to ChatGPT, and I put all the numbers in. I made sure all the numbers are correct. You can
Mm.
misinterpret maybe a six look like a zero or something in the
Mhm.
photograph. So I made sure everything was good. And then I had it run. I said, okay, I didn't even say the arc or what it was in or out. I just said, here are two groups of soil data. Find where one is more different than the other. And it did. It said, okay, this has there's three they had found. One was the organic matter, the other one was pH level, and then the other one was K, which is I think potassium. So
Okay.
those things were highly significantly different inside the ship versus right outside.
Oh.
So right away, the most important thing about all that was the organic matter. You have a wooden vessel that's decaying over time, which we believe that's the hypothesis, right? The theory that's Noah's Ark.
Sure.
If it's decaying over time below the soil, this decayed wood will affect the chemistry of the soil. Like you
Right.
fertilize your garden, it'll help things grow. So
Yeah.
the grass was different inside, maybe because the less water was coming in. That was one theory we had, or because there's different chemistry going on at the surface that was being leached up from the boat below. And so the why, if this is a natural formation with same mud materials outside, why inside the ship shape behind my head here are we getting almost three times more organic matter? And if you get the percent of carbon you're getting, meaning that there's more like wood, that's organic matter, what's living material.
Mhm.
It's highly concentrated in there versus right outside of the ship shape. That was just blowing my mind that, hey, in fact, the data actually matched Ron's two samples he got in 79 from his basic analysis. When we compare with his two samples with our 88 samples, our stats match exactly what he got. Just he was, it was great. He got a good sample for his one inside and the one outside that he got. So that hit the news. That's why we got so much interest this year because by February. I don't know if it was one of the British press or someone in Australia asked us. They said, "We're doing a story. What's the latest updates?" And so I
Mhm.
thought, oh, well, let's just go ahead and talk about. We just got soil samples. We have a new analysis of the GPR. We're seeing tunnels of possible rooms. And then that went global coverage.
Yeah.
Like everyone started talking about it, Fox News, New York Post. This is all God's doing. We didn't reach out. We didn't do a press release to anybody. People
Mhm.
came to us and they were like, "Hey, well, okay, you want to know what's going on with Noah's Ark? Here is the real data,
Mhm.
with things that we didn't expect. We just went out
Mhm.
there collecting samples, and this is what we got, and that's more proof that this is a unique object on the mountainside and not just natural geology."
Yeah, I remember when we went on our tour, I remember that there were tons of um, postings about it, and people were, putting it on their social media, and there were
Oh yeah, I
many
think more
articles, remember?
more than mainstream. I always think of the mainstream articles because that's what people send me. But people also sent me a lot of these made up like AI videos or their own shorts, 1 minute shorts,
Yeah,
and those were going viral like on Twitter or X, whatever. People are posting things and they're being. You look at the share count, huge.
yeah.
I look at the view count of these short videos. Some of them had bad information mixed up, and that got people upset too.
Hmm.
But at the same time, we can't control the media on that, but it was getting the word out, and the
Yeah,
interest level
yeah,
was high.
I remember.
We've had people tourists show up and say, "Yeah, I saw an article. I want to go see it." So,
Hmm.
it is getting the information out one way or the other, whether it's our material or someone else's material.
Sure.
The word is getting out about the story of Noah's Ark.
That's right.
Look at the time of with the world history that we're in. The
That's
time
right.
in we're not in the Middle Ages anymore. We're at the
Yeah,
end times, and this is one of the prophecies, one of the things that Christ talked about.
that's
So it's
right.
just and to be, I don't know, right now I just got shivers on my back just to think about that we're involved or I'm right close and you've seen the site, you walked on it, that to be this intimately involved in something that's making this type of impact, it's very humbling, but it's also like, wow, like we're living in this end time
Yes.
prophecy. So,
Yes, absolutely. And I think that more people will uh, just want to know. There's going to be more interest as the time of the end. I know it's not a very popular subject to talk about, but Jesus himself talks about, in the time of the end. So as that begins to get closer and closer to the time of the end, I think that more and more people will be drawn to find more interest in Noah's Ark because of the fact that Jesus, in fact, like you said, says, as in the days of Noah, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man. And that's a lot of what we talk about here on this podcast. But one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, I know we've talked about so many things and there's so much more to unpack, but our time is a little bit limited. I know it's late for you because you're seven
no
hours
problem.
ahead, but talk really briefly, if you don't mind, about how people. I want to talk about the drones, the drogues, I should say, not the drones, the drogues. But
Mm.
I also want you to get into how people spread out from this area, via the Euphrates River and came to Mesopotamia, where we find the first cities, and how before that we can find the Stone Age culture sites that we obviously visited as well, which was one of my highlights to go visit Göbekli Tepe and Perhen Tepe. If you could just wrap that up for us, that'd be awesome, if you
Yeah.
don't mind.
Yeah, so briefly, we're in eastern Turkey by the Iranian-Armenian border area. But if you look at a map for the geography, you'll see there's a number of rivers that start in Turkey and end up in
Mhm.
Mesopotamia, the Tigris River and the Euphrates. Now, the Tigris starts in the mountains south of Lake Van, So further away from here, like 2 or 3 hours south of the Ark site. But the Euphrates, if you look at the main, it's a bunch of branches that combine and forms the Euphrates River. One of the main branches is the Murat River, and that one, the headwaters, the start of that river, it's just right west of here, like 40-minute drive from.
Mhm.
You can say this valley where Dole by Zed is, the town I live in,
Yeah.
where the Ark site is above this valley, looking down on it. You go west from here, just over a little rise in the hills. It's those rolling hills. You enter the Euphrates River Valley river system. So in that area, it's called the Murat River.
Hmm.
And so, if you think of Noah's Ark landing here, how did the people get to Mesopotamia, where the first cities were created, were built? Very easy. It says they journeyed from the east, according to Genesis chapter, I don't know what the Tower of Babel story is in, chapter 10 or 11. Um, Anyways, so the people, Noah's descendants, when they decide to leave this area, the easiest way to get down and for them to migrate is, of course, following a river valley system. Where they had their animals, they're following the natural, water,
Hmm.
fresh water, and the river valleys form a natural highway. So you are journeying east from here for a ways. And then, of course, the Euphrates River turns south, and it empties out and it comes to the northern plains of Mesopotamia, which becomes the big area to Iraq and down to the Persian Gulf. So this is a natural highway system, and it fits exactly what it says for the Tower of Babel story in Genesis of how people migrated from Noah's Ark. They didn't have to go over mountain passes. They just followed this river valley from here west. And so now, in regards to how what it kind of ties into some of these early Neolithic sites, these Stone
Hmm.
Age sites that obviously are post flood. Well, like the famous one being Göbekli Tepe, the Tosh or stone culture sites. There's like 14 of them now, where they found these T-shaped columns,
Hmm.
pillars set
Hmm.
up around a central area, and then domestic homes and other buildings around it that they kind of just disappeared and got buried. Which includes Koran Tepe. Well, those sites are right near where the Euphrates River comes out of the mountains when it turns south. And so those sites are in the northern Mesopotamia area. And it's a whole new culture that there's still every week there seems to be some news story about what these sites mean, someone's theory,
Yeah.
or what the archaeological evidence is showing. Like they just found some more statues, or one statue at least of a human form, buried into the wall of one of those areas of Göbekli Tepe. That was
Hmm.
in the news a couple of days ago or last week. So it's very exciting. The final word has not been said about those sites. So, but for me, tied into a biblical account, I would see it as sometime around the Tower of Babel time, when these first cities, like before the first cities were started, um, people who were just kind of on their own in that area doing hunting and the basic things to keep it alive. They had their sheep, their cows, and the cattle, and they were starting to grow grass. Domestication of wheat has been shown to start in this area of Turkey. So this whole start of civilization again after the global flood, it shows that Turkey was a central location where the languages spread out, people spread out from. The first domestication of wheat and grass and cereal grains to for making bread. It's the first winery they dated the oldest one so far. Noah grew wine grapes. The first one was discovered in Georgia, just north of here. In the past, they thought it was Armenia, but it depends on the dating. But still, you're having this very ancient, winemaking to doing stuff with farming, all starting in or around Turkey. And if you follow where Göbekli Tepe is and go up backwards through the river valley system, you end up here at Noah's Ark.
Hmm.
So you can see how people from after the flood, migrated down that way, and they started building these temple sites or whatever you want to call it, the
Hmm.
Tosh culture sites. And then I don't know how long after that, but sometime after that, the first cities were built.
Hmm.
Oh, very exciting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Turkey holds an amazing, amazing history, biblical history, and so much to unravel with it, right? Um, I wanted to ask before we go, are there any future plans for further research at the site of Noah's Ark?
Yeah. So this year we have a whole document project plan. things we want to do. It all it comes down to funding. So
Yeah.
we even have now identified the right Turkish companies that can do some of the next steps we want to do. Dr. Saleh has done a lot of hard work. I've basically given him the hardest thing to do is basically say, okay, I want to do this. You go find how much that costs and the company that can do it and get the permission. So now I have most of that information, and we're going to start a funding campaign. I hate talking about money, but it comes down to that's what it takes. You have to bring in the experts to do the work. I can't. We don't even have the machines. Like we can't do it ourselves, anyways. We're not. I'm not an expert geophysicist. So we'll bring in the expert to collect the data, and it'll be just like what we did in 2019, where we collect the data and we turn it over and we say, okay, what do you find in it?
Yeah.
We're not trying to force the result to show it's a distinct object. We're not forcing it to be 300 cubits long. We didn't make it a boat shape. We didn't put it in the mountains of Ararat. No, all this stuff was there on its own,
Yeah.
and the data is coming out that it's Noah's Ark. Nothing else is like this. There's no other ship shape with these type of characteristics. And so for us, we just continue the journey. And so we're hoping, winter's coming in a couple months, but we're hoping that we can do some of the stuff on our list this year. The rest we'll save for next year. It's a multi-year project. The
Yeah.
ultimate goal, whether it's this year, who knows, or next year, is the core drill to get down into these voids and put cameras in it and get samples from the floor, the walls of these voids, to actually get samples of these right angles, these solid, planier material like decks. Is that petrified wood? What is it?
Mhm.
Let's drill in there and let's pull out complete samples and let's have them analyzed. And so I just talked to an official today. I gave him the hardest thing. I said, can you get me the other things, the geophysical non-destructive survey work, some of the new stuff we want to apply to the site that have not been done, that can peer deeper into the mountainside. That we have, we're just waiting for the funds. So with
Mhm.
that one, we can go ahead with. But the core drilling, because you're taking material out of the site, you got to bring in big equipment, kind of, to drill, like almost like a well, but 3-inch holes. Those we need special permission, and so we
Mhm.
just today I talked to a guy about it, and we're moving forward until God closes the doors. So we're going to do as much as He wants done on the site. No, for me personally, I don't need to find Noah's Ark to believe in the stories,
Mhm.
and I don't need to find further proof to believe that this is the best candidate. But there's always more we can do if
Yeah.
time lasts and we have the funds. So there's always new technology being invented, more stuff that we can do versus what Ron had access to in the 80s and the early 90s. So we're going to keep going until either they say nope, no more, or $0 left in your bank account, or the second coming happens and we don't have to do anything more.
Right.
So yeah,
That's awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait for drilling. I can't wait for excavations. I can't wait for people to
yeah.
get
So
in there.
excavations. Let me answer that briefly. The idea and goal uh, is that we would hope we could drill a tunnel in from the east side.
Okay.
When I say drill, I don't mean drill, but like dig a tunnel. They're not. I doubt anyone will allow actual traditional pit excavation where you're going to go straight down with like a 5-meter pit. The
Hmm.
site's very fragile, as you know, and so it's dirt. You just dig a big hole. It's basically there. It's a scar in the site, and you can't put the dirt back to form the formation again. But that's the way traditional archaeology is. It's a very destructive science. You got to take out and you
Yeah.
figure out what's there, and then you can't put anything back. We're looking at, okay, if we did it from the east side, which is opposite the visitor center side, you won't see that hole being put in, and that's a 30-foot drop there. So you're really kind of below the surface at the base of that. And so when
Mhm.
you enter the arc shape at that 30-foot drop, you can get closer to where you need to be for some of the layers that or the rooms that you're seeing on the geophysical surveys, like the GPR scans and ERT scans. So we're hoping that could be done. I think that would be a final step, obviously, is we can exhaust every other non-destructive method that would further approve the site. That would
Yeah.
then get the officials interested, saying, "Hey, you did it all. Okay, now you can do the final step, and let's open up the ark from the side."
Mhm.
So we'll see, but yeah,
Exciting times we're living in, isn't it?
for sure, yes.
Most definitely. Tell the audience how they can follow you, follow your research, and even support this endeavor that you've got with the Noah's Ark. How can people do that?
Yeah, now we haven't officially released our fundraising page or video, but we
Okay.
do have a basic donation page for those who are interested and follow or just follow our work. You go to our website, noahsarkscans.com. That's noahsarkscans.com. And so this page also links to our social media accounts, but you can look on YouTube. We're under my journal organization name of Discovered Media,
Mhm.
which talks about not just Noah's Ark, but also Mount Sinai and the Exodus, my travel adventures or whatever. So Discovered Media is the YouTube channel. But if you look up Noah's Ark scans on Facebook and on the web internet, you'll find us there, noahsarkscans.com.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we keep everyone updated. We have an a newsletter list. We send out a couple times a year. But yeah, we mainly keep I do a lot of shorts. So I'll have YouTube shorts mainly. If you follow us on YouTube, you'll figure out what the latest thing is going on.
Yeah, yeah, we do. We do. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate your time. And I think that we could do this again, maybe talk a little bit about some of the other places that we visited, Haran, and we
Oh man.
visited
Oh
Göbekli
man, yeah.
Tepe, we
Göbekli
visited
Tepe, yep.
Göbekli Tepe, and
Euphrates River, Tigris River.
yeah,
Yeah. There are two sites around Lake Von.
yeah, the Village
Yeah.
of Eight, I think it was called the
Oh yeah, the
Village of
drone. Yeah,
Eight,
we didn't touch today
the
about the
Strokes.
drone zones. You did ask the question. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a lot more to talk about.
We do, we do. This is extensive. I'm telling you, there's a lot of material that I'm bringing back that I brought back from Turkey. So I'll be doing some other videos on that, but I definitely want to have you back on so we could talk a little bit more about this stuff. So thank you again
Happy to share.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I appreciate it so much. And listen, for our audience, go follow Discovered Media on YouTube. All the links will be on our YouTube channel, and go support this ministry because I believe that it's important. It's important, most definitely.
Thank you so
So,
much.
so thank you, Andrew. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you. God
All right.
bless.